There's a kind of man society respects. He works hard, keeps his promises, carries the weight no one else wants. He's not loud, he's not reckless, he's not demanding, he just shows up. Every day, without fail, without praise. And yet, one day, something inside him quietly snaps. It's not dramatic. There's no breakdown, no rebellion, no sudden collapse. It's more like a whisper, a quiet question in the back of his mind. Is this all there is? He looks around and realizes he's done everything right and still feels completely wrong. He has the house, the job, the title, the people who say, "You're such a good man." And yet, deep down, he feels like a stranger living in someone else's skin. He's tired, but not from work. He's tired of pretending. One part of him still wants peace, structure, control, but there's another part, a part that's wild, restless, unapologetic, and it's starting to scream. That's the divided self, Carl Jung said. The quiet war between the man you were told to be and the man you were actually born to become. For years, you've played the part, worn the uniform, smiled at the right time, said the right words, pushed down the wrong feelings. You've built a life that others admire, but now you can't feel any of it. You've outgrown your mask, but you're terrified to take it off. Because what happens when the world sees the real you and walks away? Nietzsche once said, "The weak live to be accepted, the strong live to be true." But here's the brutal truth no one tells you. Being true comes with a cost. The moment you stop performing, you stop being predictable, you stop being convenient, and you stop being easy to control. And that terrifies them. The moment you become honest is the moment you become dangerous. And this is where the real journey begins. You're not broken, you're not crazy. You're just finally hearing the voice you've ignored for decades. But be warned, the road to becoming the man no one can control is not a path lined with applause. It's a path filled with loss, rejection, and brutal clarity. There are 5 stages. Each one will strip away everything false and force you to face everything real. Most men turn back, not because they're weak, but because no one ever explained the pain that comes before the power. But if you want truth more than comfort, freedom more than validation, then don't look away. Because once you hear the calling, you either answer it or you go back to sleep and wear the mask tighter than ever before. So how did this happen? How did you become a man who's dependable but empty? How did your life turn into a checklist of duties, but none of them feel like they belong to you? The truth is, you were trained for this. From a young age, you were rewarded for being a good boy. Quiet, polite, obedient, easy to manage, not curious, not wild, not too bold, just agreeable. You learned to say what others wanted to hear, to hide your frustration, to play nice, to never make anyone uncomfortable, especially those in charge. And it worked. You were praised, promoted, trusted. You became the man every system loves. Useful, predictable, replaceable. You didn't need chains or punishments. The system learned to control you with something far more effective: morality. You weren't forced to obey. You were made to believe that obedience was virtuous, that putting others first makes you a good man, that being uncomfortable is selfish, that staying silent is noble. And so you lived inside a cage and called it character. You weren't free, you were just well-behaved. Nietzsche warned us, slave morality was not born from strength, but from fear. Fear of standing out, fear of offending, fear of being alone. They didn't need to break you, they just needed to convince you that being broken was honorable. And it worked so well. You started teaching it to others. You told your son to be polite. You told your daughter to be good. You passed down the same invisible prison, and now you're starting to see the cracks. You look at your life, your success, your reputation, and you wonder, whose values built this? Because deep down, none of it feels like yours. Jung wrote, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." In other words, when we don't face the pain of living a false life, we end up living a numb one. And you're feeling it now, that quiet ache, that restlessness, that question you can't shake. Who am I when I stop trying to be useful? And more terrifying, what happens if I stop? This is the moment many men turn back. They drown the voice with noise, with productivity, with distractions. But not you. You're still here, still listening, still willing to ask the hard question. Am I living for myself, or have I been performing the role of a good man for so long I forgot who I was before it? If you're still asking, then you're ready to go deeper, because this was never about breaking free from chains. This is about realizing you were born into a cage, made of compliments, expectations, and quiet shame. And the next stage is where the cracks finally begin to show. This is stage one of the journey, the first layer of the system's control, the stage where everything looks fine on the outside. But inside, you're drifting, quietly, steadily. You are the chained, a man who's done everything right and somehow feels completely wrong. You've made it. You're respected, valued, needed. People say things like, "You're solid, you're the glue, you're the one we count on." But lately, you don't feel like a person anymore. You feel like a machine. You wake up, you execute, you provide, you repeat. You get things done, you hold it all together, but there's no joy in it anymore, only function. Somewhere along the way, you stopped asking what you want and started asking, what do they need from me now? That's the dangerous part, because they do need you, but only in the way a machine is needed, predictable, replaceable, silent. You were never taught to live. You were taught to perform, and now you're performing life instead of living it. Carl Jung once said, "Man is not tormented by fate, but by his inability to understand himself." You're not in pain because you failed. You're in pain because you succeeded in building a life that doesn't reflect who you are anymore. And the scariest part? You've become so good at your role that everyone around you assumes you're fine. They don't see the cracks, but you do. You notice how you've stopped laughing, how nothing excites you, how even the winds feel numb. You're a man who gave everything, and now you don't know what's left. Maybe you've seen this before. The father who spent 30 years providing, only to retire into silence because no one really knew him, not even his own children. He did his duty. He lived by the rules. And now he sits in the quiet with nothing but unspoken resentment and a smile no one questions. You feel that same tension building, that low-level grief for a life you're still inside of. This is the first fracture, the beginning of your undoing, or your awakening. Because here's the truth, if you stay in stage one too long, you won't explode. You'll erode. You'll keep showing up, but parts of you will stop showing up with you. And the worst part? No one will notice until it's too late. So if you're starting to feel it, the numbness, the fatigue, the quiet ache, don't ignore it. Don't call it a phase. It's not burnout. It's the mask thinning. It's your true self asking, is this all I'm allowed to be? And if you're brave enough to listen, you'll realize something brutal but freeing. You were never living. You were just useful. You've made it past stage one. You were the chained, useful, trusted, but hollow. Now you enter stage two, the cracked. This stage doesn't announce itself with crisis. It arrives like a quiet interruption, a strange dream in the middle of a normal day. You're still doing everything right, still showing up, still being the dependable one. But now your wins don't feel like victories anymore. Your smiles feel thin, and the life you built starts to feel like it belongs to someone else. You begin to ask questions, not out loud, but inside where no one can hear you. Is this really what I wanted? Why do I feel so disconnected? Why does everything feel fake? You still play your role, but you're starting to notice that everyone else is playing too. You see the fake enthusiasm, the polite lies, the masks people wear just to get through the day. And suddenly, you recognize it in yourself. Carl Jung wrote, "The shadow begins as projection of what you refuse in yourself." You start noticing the things you criticize in others, conformity, cowardice, artificial charm, and you realize you've been doing the same. The more you see it out there, the more you feel it inside. And now the system doesn't feel secure anymore. It feels suffocating. Your daily routine starts to resemble a cage. Your job title feels like a label, not an identity. You start to feel torn between what's expected of you and something else. Something wild, something honest, something you're afraid to let out. You catch glimpses of that part of you, the part that's angry, curious, hungry for truth. But instead of exploring it, you hesitate. You feel guilt, shame, fear. Because stepping into truth means risking everything you built on lies. It means you might lose approval, lose your certainty, lose control. And so you stall, you distract yourself. You tell yourself, maybe this is just a phase. But it's not. It's the crack, and it's growing. This is where most men turn back. Because the crack doesn't just reveal the system, it reveals you, your self-betrayals, your compromises, your longing for something real. And here's the truth. If you don't walk toward that crack, if you ignore the fracture growing inside you, you won't stay safe. You'll just stay stuck. So ask yourself, am I really angry at the world? Or am I angry at the part of me that keeps playing along with it? Because if you're feeling the split, if the system no longer feels like home, you've already begun stage 2. The only question now is, will you patch the crack or walk through it? Welcome to stage 3, the shadowed. This is where most men turn away and where a few begin to wake up. At this stage, you stop blaming the world and start looking inward. You've questioned the system, you've seen the cracks, but now the crack opens from the inside. You begin to meet the part of yourself you've spent your whole life trying to hide. Anger, jealousy, resentment, desire. Not the safe version, but the raw, untamed version that doesn't care if it's socially acceptable. You see a man inside you who doesn't want to be polite anymore, who doesn't want to be good, who's tired of suppressing truth to protect fragile comfort. Carl Jung called this the shadow, not because it's evil, but because it's everything you've repressed to be accepted. He wrote, "The shadow is 90% pure gold if you are brave enough to dig through the darkness." And that's what this stage is. Digging into the part of you that society told you should never see the light. You don't just see your truth, you feel it. Burning, bubbling, refusing to stay buried. At first, it's terrifying, because for the first time you realize the monster you feared in others was always inside you, starving for acknowledgement. You start to notice the lies you tell yourself, not just to others, but to keep your own power locked away. You remember every time you said, "I'm fine," when you weren't. Every time you said yes, when your soul screamed no. And now those moments return like ghosts, demanding to be seen. You're not proud, you're not heroic, you're just real for the first time in years. There's pain here, yes, shame, guilt, tears you don't want anyone to see. But beneath all of it, there's something else, relief. Because you're no longer pretending. You don't feel good in the moral sense, but you feel honest. You feel whole. You feel like a man who stopped lying to himself. This is a dangerous stage, not because you'll lose everything, but because you're finally ready to. You're not holding on to roles, to approval, to false peace. You've entered the fire, not to burn, but to burn away what isn't true. And if you turn back now, you'll go back to being a well-behaved ghost, smiling, obedient, and quietly, slowly, dying. But if you stay, if you keep walking into the shadow, you'll begin the real work of becoming unshakable. Because the man who knows his darkness cannot be manipulated by it. He doesn't fear what he's already faced. And from here, there's no pretending anymore. Only power, only truth, only the path forward. This is stage 4. You've faced the shadow. You stopped pretending. You spoke your truth. And now, the world begins to step back. Welcome to the exiled. At this point, you're no longer wearing the mask. You no longer say things just to be liked. You no longer play roles to stay accepted. You no longer shrink to make others comfortable. You live from your core, not from your conditioning. But here's what no one warned you about. People liked you better when you were performing. Now that you speak with clarity, they call you harsh. Now that you say no without guilt, they call you selfish. Now that you stop apologizing for existing, they call you difficult. The truth is, they don't miss you. They miss the version of you they could control. Carl Jung once wrote, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And to do that, you must be willing to lose everything that depended on your silence. Friends fade, family distances, social circles grow cold, because when you no longer mirror their illusions, you become threatening. You force them to face their own masks. And most people don't want that, so they push you out, label you, ghost you, mock you. Not because you're wrong, but because you're inconvenient. And here, many men break. They go back to being nice. Go back to being needed. Go back to the prison dressed up as praise. Because loneliness is sharp. Silence is heavy. And being misunderstood hurts deeper than most realize. Nietzsche once said, "You will be lonely, but you will be free." That's the paradox of stage 4. You lose the world, but you begin to gain yourself. You look around and realize most of your old connections were never with you, just with the version of you that made them feel safe. And now that version is gone. This is the desert of transformation, where everything false burns off and only what's real remains. And you will ask, was it worth it? Only you can answer that. But know this, if you return now, if you put the mask back on just to be liked again, you'll never trust yourself the same way, because the pain of exile is nothing compared to the regret of abandoning your awakening. So stay here, hold your ground, let the silence do its work, because what's coming next is not comfort, but sovereignty. And only those who've stood alone without flinching will ever taste it. You've walked through the silence. You've lost what wasn't real. Now, something begins to shift. Welcome to stage 5, the sovereign. This is not rebellion. This is not resistance. This is not the fire of youth that shouts just to be heard. This is something deeper. You don't need to be loud anymore because you're no longer seeking permission. You don't explain yourself. You don't chase approval. You don't tremble when they misunderstand you. You simply live from the inside out with full alignment, without apology. You don't need to be accepted because you've already accepted yourself. You don't need to be admired because you're no longer addicted to being seen. Carl Jung called this stage individuation, not becoming someone better, but becoming exactly who you are when nothing false remains. He wrote, "Individuation is not about self-improvement. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. You no longer look outside for a mirror of your worth. You no longer shapeshift to keep others comfortable. You walk into rooms not to dominate, but to remain whole. There's a calm here, a weightlessness. You're no longer performing, no longer hiding, no longer waiting. You've lost the need to convert anyone, prove anything, defend your truth. Because when a man is finally whole, he doesn't need to be understood to know who he is. And that's what makes him untouchable. People still try to categorize you, but none of their boxes fit anymore. You're not the villain, you're not the saint, you're not the rebel, you're something they can't control, and that makes you dangerous. But you're not out for revenge. You're not angry anymore. You've buried the war. You've made peace with the pain. You carry your solitude like armor, but without bitterness. You don't isolate. You simply choose who earns proximity, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. Because now, every step you take is deliberate. You no longer react, you respond. You no longer collapse to please. You stand because you no longer fear falling. And this is what many never reach, not because they're weak, but because this stage requires a brutal decision to never go back. Once you've tasted this clarity, this quiet, unwavering center, you know the crowd has nothing for you. No amount of applause can match the feeling of moving through life without seeking approval. You're not uncontrollable because you resist rules. You're uncontrollable because you've stopped letting others define your value. You belong to yourself now, and that is the rarest form of freedom. As Nietzsche said, the one who cannot be controlled is the one who no longer needs to be liked. This is sovereignty, and it begins the moment you say, "I'm not going back." You've walked through 5 brutal stages, not as a strategy, but as a shedding, a stripping away of everything false. You're no longer trying to fix the world. You've stopped chasing its applause. You've stopped fearing its rejection, because now you're not a man the world can control. You're not against it. You're just not owned by it anymore. You no longer play the game because you finally understand you were never meant to. You can walk through the crowd without belonging to it. You can sit in silence and feel whole. You don't need to be understood because you understand yourself. You don't need to prove anything because you no longer doubt who you are. And that's what makes you untouchable. You've become the man who cannot be shaped by fear, flattered by praise, or broken by loneliness. Nietzsche once wrote, "The strong man is not the one who conquers others, but the one who conquers who he was yesterday." You're not here to dominate. You're not here to impress. You're not here to win at a game you never agreed to play. You're here to live with clarity, with weight, with truth. Carl Jung said, "Freedom is not doing whatever you want, but no longer being controlled by what you fear." This isn't about rebellion, it's about return. You're not fighting the system. You're stepping out of its grip and stepping back into yourself. The real you, unmasked, unfiltered, unmoved. You don't need a throne. You don't need a crowd. You don't need a title. Because once you've crossed stage 5, you realize you were never supposed to become more. You were supposed to become true. And truth doesn't beg. It doesn't shout. It doesn't shake. It simply stands, quiet, rooted, unshakable. So now I ask you, what stage are you in? Are you the chained, reliable, respected, but numb? Are you the cracked, questioning everything but afraid to leap? Are you the shadowed, face to face with your truth and finally done hiding? Are you the exiled, standing alone but standing real? Or are you the sovereign, calm, dangerous, unapologetically free? Because this isn't just a video, this is a mirror. And if you saw yourself in it, then maybe it's time to stop performing and start becoming. Don't go back. Don't explain. Don't ask for permission. You were never meant to be understood by everyone, only by the man staring back at you when everything else falls away. If that man is still there, then take the next step, because once you begin this path, there's no returning, only remembering who you were before the world told you to forget.